Hi everybody. For today's exercise we're going to be learning about value, and we're also going to get some practice in on using our kneaded eraser. I really love this exercise. It helps people think kind of differently, in some ways think opposite of the way they usually would when drawing, because a good amount of this exercise is about removing the charcoal from the paper with your kneaded eraser. So I hope you enjoy watching my tutorial. So before we get started, let's talk about materials. First thing you'll need is a piece of sketching paper, nothing expensive, nothing nice, just cheap sketching paper. Kneaded eraser, of course. I love my kneaded eraser. You will also need some willow or vine charcoal. I grabbed a couple pieces just in case. And then lastly, you're going to want an image to work from. So since we're drawing an owl today, of course I'm working from this little owl image. You'll want it to be in black and white because our drawing is in black and white, and since our exercise is kind of all about value and contrast and that kind of thing, it's really going to help out if the image is in black and white. I will also say it doesn't have to be an animal that you're drawing. This exercise will work with all manner of subjects. You could do a still life, you could do a landscape, you could do a portrait, you could do a figurative image. It's just, I typically work drawing animals, so that's kind of the easiest thing we've got. All right, moving on. Step number 1. So you'll put your image somewhere where you can see it. Mine might be, I'll fold this over. Mine might be a little bit out of the shot of the camera every once in a while, so I apologize for that, but I'll try to keep it in view of the camera most of the time. Okay, first thing you'll need to do, take your willow charcoal. I like to use a slightly shorter stick, and you just fill in a section of the background to add a tone to work from. Now, when you do this, if you're working on a surface that has kind of a texture, this board I'm working on is pretty smooth, but if you're working on like a table or something that has like a little bit of a rough texture, you might see that texture showing through. That's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. That's fine. That it'll work just fine. Unless it's like a really obnoxious texture, you should be okay. All right, so you notice I'm putting in a nice medium tone. I'm not getting anything really, really dark, nothing really, really light. So just as an example, down on the bottom of my page here, this is an example of what would be a very light toned background, and that might be too light for this exercise. And then to contrast, this background, something like that would probably be a little bit too dark. So something between these two, we get that. All right, now we're gonna go off the books, not off the books. We're just gonna take our, rather than drawing with like a pencil or the charcoal, we're going to actually practice drawing with our eraser. So another reason I love this exercise is it gets, if you've not used a kneaded eraser very much, this is a nice way to get you used to all of the different ways the kneaded eraser can be used. All right, so I've got my toned background. I'm going to take a look at my image now, and I'm going to find where are the lightest spots. So I'll go walk us through all that. The lightest spots in this little owl image are pretty obvious. Right here is a very light area. Under here is very light. These little feathers right here are also very light. This, and then a little streak right here, this little blob. So those are kind of the light areas that we can focus on. So taking my eraser, squishing it around, trying to find a surface that I am going to enjoy using, that's going to be the right shape for the marks I want to make. I'm going to carve out some of these features. Now I'm focusing on shape rather than line here, or I suppose shape works. Carving out these spaces and not thinking as much about making a thin line and trying to outline anything. I'm more thinking large blob shape, puzzle piece, big blob shapes, if that makes sense. All right, so I've got that part of that heart-shaped face in there. Now I'm gonna bring in a few of these feathers. And then over here. One thing that you might be noticing, I'm constantly kind of squishing this eraser around in my hands, and that's because as you use it, it gets dirty. So I'll use it a little bit to find some of these light spots. It gets dirty. You can see here. You can see how black that is getting. So I don't want to keep working on that dirty surface, so I can squish it around and find a clean spot on my eraser to work with. Another thing you'll notice is that the white, as I erase, it never gets truly back to 100% the white of the paper. I know that frustrates some people, but it's kind of just the way it is. If it's really bothering you or you really don't like it, at the end, if you have a white chalk or a white pastel, you can maybe lightly go in and try to cover up some of that darkness in those areas that you really want to be brilliant white. But the danger of you coming in with pastel over this charcoal is things will just turn gray. You won't really be able to cover up the charcoal 100%, but sometimes people keep trying anyway, and then it just kind of turns gray. So, all right, now we might start to see, you might be noticing this little ghostly owl starting to appear in here. And when you feel pretty confident that you've marked in most of those lightest light areas, we can grab our willow charcoal again and start to find some of those darker areas. So back on our photograph, dark area, of course the eyes are black, they're very dark. The beak is dark, this shaded area is dark back here, this is dark back here, around the head, around the chin, I guess, is a black row of feathers. Down here too, that's very dark. Now I do really want you to take the time to look at your photograph, whatever you're working from, and if you have to say it out loud, go ahead and say it out loud, but even just point, these are the dark spots. Take your time, identify them. I think we might take for granted that we know what things look like, and I know what's dark on this owl, or whatever image you're working from. And that's when we start to make mistakes, when we assume we already know. That could even be true of a lot of things in life. We start to make mistakes when we assume we already know. All right, so you might notice I'm making some adjustments. So this beak, this dark spot, was originally over here. I'm trying to shove it over this way just a little bit more. Because originally that original spot was just not quite right. So I can take my finger and blur and smudge things a little bit. Something that's really fun about this way of using charcoal, this exercise, is it's very painterly. There seems to be something very tactile and painty about this way of manipulating the charcoal. I'm just continuing to identify those dark areas and fill them in. Some people really love this exercise. For some people it just clicks and it really almost changes the way they think about how they're drawing. And for other people it really doesn't click. It doesn't help. It's not, you know, the exercise for them. I think it's important for everybody to try it. It's good to always try something, but if it doesn't click for you, if this just, your owl did not turn out the way you wanted it to, that's okay. Different exercises are going to work for some people and they won't work for others, and it doesn't mean, you know, anybody's a better or worse artist than anybody else. It just means you're different. Okay, so this is a little dark spot right here. Here's a dark area of feathers right in here. It's like we're working to coax the owl out of that toned background. We're finding it in there. I'm going to smooth with my finger. I'll just smooth this area a little bit. Okay, and now back here with some pretty dark looking area. Back here. These are some darker feathers here, and then you know, down this must be a wing that's kind of folded over the back of our owl. We have all right. Now I could continue. I could work on this and refine as much as I want. And same with you. You can take as much time to just sit if you're really enjoying the process and you're just loving poking around and adding pigment and removing pigment and finding all those nice little tones in between. By all means, you know, doodle and sketch away to your heart's content. But for the sake of this video, I'm gonna stop what I'm doing in like 2 seconds. For the most part, I'll put in some little speckles. Okay, owl. Oh, you know what? I'm also, I think I'll try to add the slightest little highlight in here. So to do that, I'm squeezing my this thing, kneaded eraser. I'm getting a little point on my kneaded eraser, and that. Just removing a little bit of that pigment. And I can do the same over there. Okay. So here's an owl. Here's, right here is actually, it's so funny how different they look. Here's another owl that I did for a different class demonstration. And this one's on a slightly different kind of paper, so you see you can kind of see that. And this one I took a little bit more time to really refine. So you see that too. It's always interesting though. I do this exercise a lot, and it's every single owl turns out differently. So don't be upset if your owl doesn't look like my owl. It very well may not, and it's really not a bad thing. But I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you enjoy this exercise and give it a try for yourself. If you liked the video, you can please subscribe or give me a little like, and I will see you next time.